Hello, this is Father Rich coming to you from the sacristy at Our Lady of Peace for our next installment of How the Church Has Changed the World. I'm coming to you here wearing a little something different, a black cassock. And it's part of the liturgical vestments of the priest that is still able to be worn. You see it less, was worn much less in really the 70s, 80s, 90s, seeing some of the young clerics that wear it more often. But the name of the essay today is called The Black Gown and What Could Have Been. And another reference, the black gown is in parentheses, others sometimes called the black robe. And that was the title that many of the Native Americans gave to the Jesuits, who were missionaries trying to bring the faith in Jesus Christ to North America. And that goes all the way back to the 1600s in Canada and North America. We have the North American Martyr Shrine in the United States up in Arsville, New York, which is also the birthplace of St. Kateri Tekakwitha, and where one of the North American martyrs, St. Isaac Jogues, was killed. And then there's also one up in Canada, a couple like an hour from Toronto, that also honors the original 8 Jesuits who died in helping bring the faith in the 1600s to America. And there's actually a movie out there called Black Robe about some of those efforts of the Jesuits. But this essay is actually about a Jesuit who lived a couple hundred years after that. He lived in the 1800s. And he actually, there's a town in South Dakota named Desmet, D-E space S-M-E-T, and that was his last name. It also has the nickname of the little town on the prairie, because it is the place where the Pleasant Children's books were written by Laura Wilder and her daughter Rose. So that's the town based off of that story of Little House on the Prairie. I grew up with 4 older sisters watching that back in the day. And they said how they have a festival every year in that town for the Little House on the Prairie. They have nothing to remember the person who their town is named after, who is much more significant. He is now called the Apostle to the Rockies. He was amazingly well respected by the Native Americans. They say back in the day, when at some point the U.S. started to spread further into Native American lands in the 1800s, they asked for a black robe to come to them to teach them about Christ, because they still had the remnant of the missionary efforts of the Jesuits 200 years earlier, and the faith was still kind of dormant there, and so they asked for a black robe. And so Father Desmet was sent. He would eventually travel over 180,000 miles throughout the country, west the coast, throughout the Rockies, east to west in North America, and some estimates have it even up to 260,000. He was, again, an exemplar for how to evangelize. He wasn't forcing the faith on these people, but the Native Americans were seeking it. They were hungering for it. They were thirsting for it. They talk about the hundreds and thousands of people, of Native Americans, that would come and listen to Father Desmet preach and teach about Jesus and the hope that they were called to. He would admonish them. He would call them out on the inappropriate behavior, the killing and the drinking and the promiscuousness. And he would call people and call them to conversion in their moral life, not just forcing this belief in Christianity on them. And they tell one story about a chief of one of the tribes who very clearly recognized, when he was challenged by Father Desmet, that he was right. And he called his whole tribe to better behavior. Really remarkable. When it came to the final peace with the Sioux people in Sitting Bull, who did Abraham Lincoln turn to be the representative of the United States? A Jesuit priest, Father Desmet, because he was so respected. They say multiple times he was called in to negotiate peace and to help try to find peace, not just between the U.S., United States, and the Native Americans, but between their tribes. He was so well respected. He was known for his honesty, that he didn't lie, that he was a man of integrity. And he eventually died in 1873 in St. Louis, Missouri. And I'm not sure if I was trying to investigate whether his cause for sainthood had been opened up. You think of him and others like Father Marquette, who helped bring the faith down the Mississippi and Missouri rivers. But who knows, someday there might be. But the black robes, they remind us they wore these because there was simplicity in their garb. The cassock was really an offshoot of the Roman garb of the 6th century that eventually the laity moved away from, and the priests kept it as they went to foreign lands, and so it became garb that was unique to the clerics, and so it soon became a part of that. Also, eventually it was spiritualized to represent death to sin, death to self, and kind of that sacrificial love of Christ that priests certainly are called to, and missionaries as well as all of us as Catholics. So we think about what could have been if Father De Smet would have been, and people like him could have continued to be involved in the challenge and the tensions between the Native Americans and our United States ancestors. But unfortunately we know, and to this day, that continues to be something that's a bit of a black eye in our American history, was how the treatment and really the mistreatment of the Native Americans. Now, unfortunately, people like Father De Smet, they had they say one university moved a statue of him from outside into the inside because of pressure from people that are accusing some of the Christian missionaries for racism and forcing their faith and really oppression of the natives. We see that happening with Saint Junipero Serra even more actively out in California. It's a challenging issue, but nonetheless, certainly Father De Smet was clearly motivated by wanting to bring the love and truth of Christ to these people and not to manipulate the Native Americans for his gain. And if, again, all missionaries and all the Americans could have had that motivation, who knows what things would look like now. But we thank God for those efforts of those like the black robe, the black gown, Father De Smet, and the Jesuit missionaries. And we know that they certainly helped change the world in positive ways in bringing Jesus to every corner of our world. Thanks for joining me today. Have a great day, and God bless.